resident NBA and Pistons expert. We like to call him the Stats Guru here on the Knee Jerks, and he's been a friend of the show for the last couple of years. And we always enjoy bringing him on to talk about the Pistons and about the NBA in general. But probably we'll spend most of our time tonight about the Pistons because, as everybody knows by now, they've made a coaching move. Uh, Dwane Casey no longer, after 5 years, will be coaching this team. He's been moved upstairs into the front office, into a yet to be determined job, by the way. So we are going to be talking about that, and we're going to, of course, recap that 17-65 season that they just labored themselves through. Siddy will kind of take us through what he liked about, despite that record, what he did like about the season. He'll tell us some of the things that bothered him. And as you can see behind him, if you're watching this podcast on YouTube, he's got a Fire Troy, not Dwane, haphazardly made sign that he put together in the last probably 45 seconds before we went on the air. And it kind of shows us where his emotions lie on this whole Dwane Casey situation. But I'll stop talking and let Siddy come in and say some words. Siddy, how you doing, my friend?
It's good to be here. I'm happy to be here. Hi, Al.
Hey.
And regarding the Pistons, though, I got to say, in all my visits, I have never been in such a grumpy mood about the Pistons as I am right now. Since the last time we spoke, they did the Saddiq Bey trade for a guy named James Wiseman. Mm-hmm. Dwane Casey has lost his position or resigned, we're being told. And then the pathetic manner in which they closed out the season post All-Star break. It was just an embarrassment. Mm-hmm. And normally I'm not very, when it comes to what they call tanking,
right?
I'm not what you'd call someone who cares that much about it. In general, I'm cool with teams, pointing the boat in that direction, doing rebuilds, putting themselves in a position to draft. But the manner in which Detroit performed that in the final 25 games, it was unnecessary. They were the only team doing it, except for a couple of teams that were suddenly finding themselves tied and, outside the play-in bracket. Washington, Orlando, or Indiana suddenly had a 1-week sprint down the standings. But Detroit went into that mode early, and no one else really did. Houston, San Antonio. I mean, Houston and San Antonio and Detroit were basically tied with 20-some games left in the season. The Pistons, they closed out 2-23. The second win being against Indiana, who was laying down for that game. Mm-hmm. And then Houston went 9-11. 4-1 in their final 5 games, playing all their young guys. San Antonio closed out 3-2. They closed out 8-13. The Pistons finished 5 games behind these other two. They all have the same odds. So basically, they tanked to ensure they finished no worse than 5th rather than 6th or 7th. That's quite a sacrifice for that meager return.
You know what? For folks who may not be as tuned into this as you are, I think it bears asking just to kind of describe to those listeners what it is you're talking about in terms of how the Pistons indeed did that in the last 25 games. I know it's not. People think you may just be referring to how they played, but that's not really it, is it?
No, yeah, it's the way teams are put together. Who's active, who's not active. Dwane Casey, I mean, he's a master at throwing sugar in the gas tank when needed. And he was, following his marching orders and putting some lineups out there when games were close, towards the end of a game to increase the chances of not coming out on top. And that's part of the game, but it wasn't needed this year. This is the year everybody was playing it straight. The NBA has been flattening out the odds on getting the top pick,
right?
And the fans who were watching this debacle, we got punished. We were stuck watching 40 minutes of Killian Hayes and James Wiseman when he wasn't in foul trouble.
Yeah, and just to add that in, I'd be honest with you, I pretty much checked out on the last month of the season. There was nothing to watch that was because anybody worth watching was not playing at that point.
Only Jaden Ivey.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Ivey did great. You know, he's always fun. He's a fun guy to watch for sure. He's got a bounce to his play. Kind of plays like Tyrese Maxey. He's got that bounce, which makes him even cooler. So he's great, you know. And then Duran was still playing, but he got hurt.
Exactly. Yeah, and his minutes got reduced somewhat because of the Wiseman trade as well. So.
Yeah, you know, they're stashing. You know, suddenly, you know, Beef Stew disappeared. Bogey, Burks. We didn't trade these guys, and then we just mothballed them. You know. So
why do you suppose that? Why do you suppose they didn't quote unquote play it straight? Why do you think that was?
Paranoia. You know, I blame it on the front office. You know, it comes from there. Dwane Casey, his job's to win. You know, he's a coach. Coaches think about today. So it came from the top. Casey's been around. He follows marching orders. Casey was doing it during the bubble year. You know, pre-Troy. You know, they had that team with Derrick Rose and Christian Wood, Bruce Brown.
Right.
You know, that team, they were trying to point it south, and it was a strangely competitive team. And, you know, Dwane did what he was supposed to do in those cases. You know, he started using Kyrie Thomas as a point guard and things like that. So, but basically, you know, this trend, which has been so prominent through the years, this seemed to be the year that it disappeared almost. And Detroit didn't seem to be reading the tea leaves.
The Dwane Casey situation, we may as well just confront that right away. I made a little tease at the top of the show because of your little sign in the background, but you do seem to believe or seem to have some sort of skepticism about whether or not Casey indeed freely, although you confided into me that you thought he might be tired, physically tired or just emotionally tired from coaching this team. But do you really think that he indeed was not really allowed to make this decision by himself?
I can only guess, and my guess is that he did not quit. He was. They had a discussion. Apparently, they have a good relationship. Troy, you know, Dwane predates Troy.
Right.
Troy kept him on, and
extended him, as a matter of fact.
Pardon me.
And gave him an extension as well.
Right. So they worked together for 3 years. So I guess they had a good relationship. You know, I don't know if I'm right, but to me it seems kind of weird that after all this suffering, you know, that finally, you know, Detroit's going to turn the corner next year. And, you know, who would not want to coach this group? You're going to have a top 5 pick. You've got some free agency cash to play with.
Yep.
Bogey's coming back. Burks is coming back. You know the cast of characters.
Right.
Cade, Duran, Ivy. I mean, that's what coaches, you know, salivate for. So I just find it very strange that he would suddenly resign. And Casey, to me, he's like a coach's coach. The guy breathes coaching.
Right.
To say I want to be with my wife and my family, I'm skeptical.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's fair, I suppose. My contention is, though, that if he was truly doing this against his will, that he would not be in the front office. That's my opinion. I would think that he would just be leaving the organization entirely. But you're might be right.
That is unusual. So that could be true. You know, what you're saying could very well prove your point. But I'm just surprised and depressed. You know, because I don't think Dwane was a good coach for this team. The team always played hard.
Yeah.
He took on a team 3 years ago when Weaver came in with 11 new faces, and he got he showed that he's a coach. He got the pieces fitting together quickly, that's a sign of a good coach. You never hear anything bad about him. You never hear people complaining about him, and there are only 5 guys from that team from 3 years ago. It's not like they need a new voice.
Well, you know what? I was just going to mention that because I touched on this in the piece that I wrote Monday about the Chuck Daly coaching search and how the parallel. And one of the things that I respect about Dwane Casey is that when he was hired in 2018, as you know, he was not brought in with the idea that this was going to be a teardown rebuild. He was brought in, sold on the big 3 trio of Blake Griffin, Reggie Jackson, Andre Drummond, and that Tom Gores recruited him very heavily. I remember at the time you were very surprised pleasantly that Dwane Casey chose the Detroit job over other opportunities that he may have had. And he was not brought in to oversee a rebuild. And that's exactly what he ended up doing. And he did not complain that I know of. He didn't bitch. He didn't make veiled comments in the media. He didn't.
Totally professional.
Right.
He was the face of the organization,
Right.
handled it great.
Yeah, right.
And the thing I'm struck by him since he arrived in Detroit, it's amazing how many players had an uptick in performance despite all this losing. How many players had an uptick when they played for him? Bogey, Alec Burks.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, Bogey had the best season of his career.
Blake Griffin had his career season with Casey here.
He had a rebound season. But I mean, I was making a list. You know, there's Reggie Bullock, Wayne Ellington, Langston Galloway, Derrick Rose, Milton Plumlee, Corey Joseph, Trey Lyles, Kevin Knox. You know, these guys had upticks under him. So he must create an environment that helps these guys. That's his job. So why would you want to replace? This is a risk. Replacing him is a big risk.
You know, you mentioned something about you know, as you're speaking, I'm recalling, I think it was only last week. Did you see the clip? Which team had the players hitting each other on the bench?
Minnesota. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was,
now that, like you said, nothing like that remotely happened in Detroit. And Minnesota is a much better situation than the Pistons are from a one-loss record situation. But that nothing at all like that happened in Detroit.
No, never had anything, even in Toronto. I mean, to me, you know, this guy's a coach's coach. He breathes coaching. He represents what coaching is about. It's just something he does. It's what he does, you know. When he came to Detroit, he was happy to come here just because he wanted to coach. It didn't have to be the team that was ready to win the championship. He would rather coach a 500 team than not coach and wait around. So I can't believe he's just going to sit there on the sidelines. I don't know, maybe he'll end up working with Joe Dumars. I mean, you know, these guys that get kicked out of Detroit, guys who, you know, I think Joe Dumars should have gotten a lifetime deal. I think he should still be here, you know. So, you know, people they get itchy, like, oh, we got to do a change. We got to show that we're doing something. Let's change the coach. No, I don't think that was wise.
We're talking with Siddy Hall here on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg Eno from my now Substack. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And follow me there, and also follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. And Big Al is here, of course. Al Beaton, and we'll bring Big Al in right now. What you got for Siddy Hall?
Yeah, well, sticking with the coaching search, I mean, I can see the arguments both ways for moving on from Dwane Casey, but if you move on from him, you want to have a home run hire. And look, I've got a list of some of the candidates up here. Most of these guys are career assistants. None of them really have a resume that blows you away when it at least comes to running teams. Most of these guys have been like the lead assistants on teams like the Heat, the Nets, the Pelicans. There's a couple guys who have connections to Weaver through OKC. And the only kind of big names I've seen thrown out there, one, Kevin Ollie, who honestly I only remember because of him winning the NCAA title at coaching UConn and then his fall from grace. I've seen Jerry Stackhouse mentioned, the ex-Piston, and Ime Udoka, who was essentially run out of Boston for having an affair. So I don't know about you, but I'm not very much blown away by the guys you're talking to.
Totally agree, Al. And that, you know, talking about the risk, you know, how do you know who's going to be a good coach?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, right now, the top name that comes up regularly is Kenny Atkinson, you know, the top assistant in Golden State. He had very good success in Brooklyn, and he was fired for Steve Nash, and the whole league was surprised when he was fired. So that would be, like, to me, the top guy that based on guys with experience, you know. Now, maybe there's a great assistant out there that hasn't had a chance, and we just won't find out until we see them do it. So it's really hard to even say if these guys are good or not. What does concern me, though, I have one concern about this, and it's this. I'm going to talk about something different. last year, the Pistons on their two-way contracts, every team gets two guys on two-way contracts, and the Pistons signed Buddy Boeheim. The son of Jim Boeheim, I believe. Is he the son or the grandson?
I believe it is his son, and
that was very
Yeah.
swampy. Troy has a relationship with Syracuse. He was an assistant under Boeheim, and then Buddy Boeheim's numbers were horrific, by the way. Didn't play much, but they were really bad. And it makes you wonder if that was just a total swamp move. So along those lines, though, it's, connections, friends, and doing, making your decisions based on that, an old school network. Troy Weaver, does he have much of a network? His network is what? Oklahoma City?
Yeah.
And a couple of the names are Oklahoma City assistants. So if he ends up hiring an assistant from Oklahoma City, where he used to work, again, not saying it can't work, but it makes you wonder, man, if this guy, let's wait to see if that happens, but I'm wondering if that's going to happen.
Well, I guess we'll see. You mentioned that it's a risk, and I suppose that it is in a way, but on the other hand, the team won 17 games last year, and I don't know how much worse they can get. But I mean, when you say it's a risk, you mean, what's your concern that the new coach they bring in, what will happen? What's the worst that can happen with a new coach?
Well, you waste valuable years, man. You're wasting the clock's always ticking. We're entering year 4 of the 8-year plan. We're supposed to start seeing something. And you look around, you can compare. Look at Oklahoma City. They went 40-42 minus the number 2 pick in the draft. They have no lottery picks on their team. Jalen Williams was this year's rookie, was number 12, and Gilgeous-Alexander, they got in a trade for Chris Paul a few years back. He was like 13 or 14, but this is just Lou Dort. Undrafted free agent. Oh yeah, Josh Giddey was like number 7 or number 8, but no top 5 picks. Detroit's got, more high picks than they do. They're winning 40 games and we're stuck at 17. So, what gives? Why the 23 game difference?
Well, let's talk about that. We're talking with Siddy Hall here in the Knee Jerks. Let's talk about the season. What were some things, though, despite the 17 wins and despite, like you said, the horrific way that they finished the year, that 16-66 season, by the way, in 1980, I think that the Pistons lost their last 14 in a row, and this team just almost did that, just about did that.
May I interject, by the
sure.
way? I went to a couple of those games.
In 1980?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Back in our high school days.
Yeah.
Those glorious high school days.
Yeah.
And I went to Kamikaze Night. And that was
I remember that.
That was the night
was
where
that the
all
Ron
fans
Lee thing?
tried to predict how many times Ron Lee would hit the floor.
That's right.
And my father nailed it.
I think I went with you. I want to say I was with you.
You might have been with me.
I think I was there. Yeah.
I just remember we went to dinner before the game, and some people working in the restaurant were laughing at us because we were going to a Pistons game.
I don't know where we would have eaten on the way to a Pistons game, because there was nothing between our house and the Silverdome. Nothing. Zero.
Well, Dad was paying, right? But look, that game, Phil Jackson, by the way, was a player assistant for the Nets.
He was.
That was one of his final games of his career.
You're absolutely correct about that memory. Absolutely.
But the thing you got to finish that. So my dad correctly predicted that it was like 4 or 5 times. And so, you were going to win.
Crazy George acted them out, I think. Didn't he, Crazy George?
Who's that? The guy at halftime?
Wasn't he the halftime guy? Wasn't he the one that after you made, or maybe it was the chicken? Maybe the chicken was there that night.
I do remember Crazy George.
Somebody acted out replicated all of the dives into the stands in as part of revealing the number. I remember that as well.
No, I don't remember that.
No, you don't remember that? Okay.
I don't. I mean, you hold on. Wait. I don't remember.
Okay.
It's probably true. I have no memory of that. What I do remember is this. we were waiting for our tickets. My dad was right, and we were waiting, and maybe a month later, 2 tickets arrived in the mail, and I opened up the envelope, and the game was for the New Jersey Nets again. They're like, what's the least likely game these people are going to attend?
Right,
Oh, they're not
right.
going to go to see New Jersey again. We'll send them Nets tickets.
Oh, that's
Anyway,
funny. That's funny.
the Pistons. But to answer your question, this year, what was there to be excited about? My answer,
Crazy
not
George.
much.
That's another crazy. That's the wrong Crazy George.
That's the wrong crazy. That's the one I was thinking of.
That's the Crazy George from the Bay Area that went to all the Seals games and this is another crazy.
Crazy
we're really
George
going down a
sounds
rabbit
like a
hole
guy
here.
who sells appliances or something. But anyway,
get back on
this
track
year,
here.
what was there to be
Kamikaze
excited
night,
about? And my short answer is not much. Yeah, there was a lot, but the main answer we've known for a long time. It was Ivy and Duran. I mean, they were really good, and those 2 and Cade are the futures. So yeah, that was really important. Besides that, the only thing I can say that I would say was a plus that people are not talking about, and that was Marvin Bagley. I thought Bagley played well after his injury when he came back. Has trouble staying healthy, man, but he was playing with great aggression over those final 10, 15, 20 games. Clearly better than James Wiseman. I mean, they're kind of similar, same height, lefties. They take up the same space on the floor.
Yeah.
Bagley's the future. Forget James Wiseman.
Well, there seems to be a swath though of not. I'm not saying they're right, but there seems to be a swath of Piston faithful on Twitter anyway, who seem to really like Wiseman, and I'm not sure why that is, but they seem to really gravitate to this guy.
We always like the new guy. We want him to work. We want him to be successful. It's always like that. And and Wiseman, like the first time you look at him, you're like, wow, look at this guy runs like a deer. And after watching him over and over, my conclusion was if you need a guy to run a 30-yard, a 20-yard dash free throw line to free throw line, I got your guy. It's James Wiseman. No one's better. He flies.
Yeah.
But free throw line to baseline on both ends, what do you got? The guy doesn't do anything. He just, the only thing he can do is dunk, which matters. But he has terrible hands. And I got to a point, like anytime they threw him the ball, I would yell out at the TV, no, because something bad was going to happen. He's going to lose the ball. He was just going to try and take a dumb shot. He doesn't have it. He has no instincts on defense. He doesn't guard the rim. He gets in foul trouble. He clogs the paint on offense, calling for the ball. This guy, come on, why did Golden State give him up? Golden State needs a guy like him. Why would they just throw him away? And then Troy Weaver, this guy, he needs to get fired. I'm sorry, man. You got Sadiq. This Sadiq Bey trade, it just opened. It's like he tore a scab off of me going back to his first days on the job, where I was just completely livid and losing my mind when he traded. The deals. He traded Luke Kennard, who has led the league in 3-point percentage for 2 years in a row, and Bruce Brown for Sadiq, and 4 second-round draft picks for Sadiq Bey. And then it was like, well, Bey was pretty good, so, you can kind of, all right, he's young, we can kind of live with that. And then we trade him for Wiseman. So think about the player investment in time. 3 years Kennard, 2 years Bey. Now we're up to 5. 3 years Bey, 2 years Bruce Brown. That's 8 years of player investment, draft picks. All we got is James Wiseman, who won't be in the league in 3 years. And then but here's is even worse, is that just looking at Wiseman for Bey. You're a GM. You're like, okay, Golden State, we're interested in Wiseman. And they're like, yeah, well, we like Sadiq. And we're like, okay, well, Sadiq makes $3 million a year. James makes $9 million a year. Sadiq has been a better player. What else are you going to give us? It's elementary. I mean, anyone can figure that out. Why can't Troy Weaver? And that's exactly what he did when he traded Wood and Kennard and Brown. He traded guys for 20 cents on the dollar, and it's absurd. He can't trust him. Why is this guy the GM? This has happened twice now. So, where's the supporting cast, that's supposed to be in place? Those guys were the supporting cast.
Well, speaking of that, the question in one of his decisions, Weaver's decisions, aside from the coaching hire, obviously, is what to do with Killian Hayes, who I know, and anybody who listens to this podcast knows you're not a big fan of. And there is now a decision now. He was drafted 3 years ago. It's time now to discuss what to do with him. And what do you think before? Two questions. What should they do with him? And what do you think they'll do with him?
Well, yeah, he and Wiseman and Beef Stew are all up for contract extensions starting in July.
Right.
Which, and that contract, though, doesn't kick in until 24, 25, right?
Right.
Kind of a weird system.
Right.
That's the exact same situation that Luke Kennard was in. Yeah,
right.
Every time we get to this moment, this is when, Troy Weaver dumps these guys.
Right.
And just starts over again, He just, those second contracts are tricky. And you gotta, they can't involve pain. No more, cheap rookie contracts, right? Where there's no negotiating.
Right.
So basically, Weaver's done one deal, and that was the Bagley deal.
Right. Yes.
Now he's got to do 3 deals plus free agents.
Correct.
So I'm expecting he'll sign them all. These guys have already been talking. They already have a number in their heads, and they're going to sign for as many as 4 years. So we're going to have this 8-year plan is going to be 8 years of Killian Hayes. He's going to, and then the question is, there's a rule about the minimum amount that you can extend guys for. And Killian Hayes does not deserve a raise. I'm sorry. If you're going to keep him around at backup guard pay, like $5-6 million a year, it's all right, I can live with that. But
which is what he's going to be when Cade comes back, because the backcourt's going to be Cade and Ivy.
Right. Yeah, of course. It's going to be we don't even know if he's a championship caliber backup. There's a lot of investment here, time. Killian was second in minutes played this year.
Yeah.
That was not supposed to happen,
No.
So 3 years, think of all the guys we got rid of, we made the same investment. They all get thrown away, but we're keeping Killian Hayes. How messed up is that? So Hayes is probably going to get, $10 million a year or so. Stewart's going to get 14, 15. You can compare him to Robert Williams III. He got 12 and a half, and that was a year or two ago. So he's going to be a little bit higher. And then Wiseman. Now, Wiseman did not qualify for, maybe even Killian doesn't qualify for the 20% minimum raise on an extension. So Wiseman, maybe they can offer less money. I pray to God that's the case. I'm really dying to find this out.
Yeah, right. No,
how much of an investment are we making in these guys?
Right. Let's bring Big Al back in. We're talking with Siddy Hall here, the Knee Jerks. What you got for us, Siddy?
Yeah, it's you're making a compelling case here for Weaver. I wasn't really against Weaver, I should say. I really was thinking, well, let's fire this guy. But you're making quite the case that and I guess that's the thing, is that he's had some solid draft picks, and obviously he got a lot of goodwill with that.
Wait, Al, come on.
No, well,
come on.
No,
number
I'm
one
pick
in the draft.
Obviously,
number
he got
5 pick in the draft.
He had a lot of goodwill built up with the fan base for what they perceived to be good drafts, especially the first one when he got when he ended up getting Stewart and Bay, in the
that looked good.
Lock, things like
kind
that.
of made up for the Killian pick, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, because look at who they could have had instead of Killian. That's
Oh my God,
that's the
Tyrese
thing.
Halliburton, another reason to fire him.
But I guess the issue I have with Weaver, more than some of the stuff you're bringing up, is the roster construction. It just feels like a mishmash of players with no real consideration as to how they can actually mesh together as a full roster. And then you got Dwane Casey was stuck trying to make this mishmash of 5 centers and a whole bunch of guards essentially into a cohesive unit with rotations and stuff. And I saw a fan base getting upset with Casey, and I'm thinking, you're asking him to make prime rib out of hash the way the roster was.
Water, wine out of water, right?
Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah. So yeah, I agree. Alice, Casey did great under the circumstances.
Yeah.
He did the best he could. Guys.
Well, would you call him a scapegoat at this point?
For sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no doubt about it. You got to blame someone. It's easy to blame the coach.
Yeah.
Often it is the coach, but I don't think it is in this case. But as far as drafting, you got to go back. That Killian Halliburton, ouch.
Yeah.
That is painful. I mean, Halliburton's now the best player out of that draft, it's looking like. And it was just sitting there right in front of him. Which guy do you choose, And, Greg, we've talked about this, before the draft. I was telling people in social media, don't draft Killian Hayes for God's sake. You just look at the film, And in Tyrese Halliburton's case, everyone's like, oh, he shoots the ball funny. Like, I don't care. He can shoot the ball underhand. I don't care. He shoots 60% in college, And then he comes in the NBA and he's awesome. So, and then the Saddiq, like you said, Saddiq was a great trade or draft, and now that's out the window.
Yeah.
And going back to Saddiq, there's, Saddiq, like the others, was entering the contract extension time, and he plays a valuable position. Wings that can shoot threes are expensive.
Yeah.
And, Troy Weaver, didn't want to pay that price. And I understand Troy has been really conservative with protecting that cap and not wasting his money, except on guys that never wear a Piston uniform, the Dwayne Dedmans and all those guys,
Yeah.
But I understand his hesitation, man, but you got to do it. You got to it's just the way it is. And Bay was going to be expensive, but don't sweat it. Just pay it, sign the guy, and you can trade him. And if you're worried about how much he's asking for, don't sign him right away. He's a restricted free agent. You can just wait and see what the market dictates, like with Phoenix and Ayton last year. And in that case, Ayton won. The market said you're a max player, and Phoenix matched it. That's all he had to do. There's no rush. There's no rush. Just Saddiq's making $3 million a year. He's on your team next year. Let him play another year, make $4 million. Just, and you can figure it out. You don't have to figure that out today. What that dollar figure is going to be. And if it is a lot of money, it's okay. You can trade these guys. Malik Beasley got traded. Luke Kennard got traded. All these guys get moved. There's going to be demand for them. And to end up with James Wiseman, I'm telling you guys, people don't understand how bad this guy is. He is really not an NBA player.
Oh boy.
And let me also add that the one other thing I kind of have with Weaver right now was not trading Bogdanovich, because you're expecting a 33. He's 33, had a career year. Are you expecting him to replicate that at age 34 when his value was essentially at an all-time high? When he hits the decline, he's going to decline like a one off a cliff.
Alec Burks too.
Burks exactly. He's in his, like 33.
Yeah, Burks had 1 year left. Bogey 2. Yeah, this is leverage. Remember, he traded Luke Kennard after Luke missed like 55 games. Yeah, and then the Clippers are like, well, he might be hurt, so you got to give us some picks. And he's like, well, okay. And he gives them 4 picks. And then right away, the Clippers signed Kennard to 4 years.
Yeah.
You know, they locked him up and they got him down a little bit. They're like, well, Luke, you are hurt, so we want to bring down your set, you know, and it was brilliant. That's gamesmanship. That's how you're supposed to do it. And, you know, Troy Weaver is he's losing on all of these. I'll tell you, here's what he's done well. He deserves some credit. There's one thing he's done 2 things well. Didn't screw up the cap into the future. Which you know, the bad part of that is guys like Bay walking away. But generally speaking, he's done a great job. The other thing was in year 1, the signing of Jeremy Grant and Mason Plumlee was genius. Those were his 2 best moves by far, better than any draft pick. You know, Grant, people were thinking, 20 million, I don't know, role player, but he was correct on him. And then Grant turned into Duren, and, you know, draft picks at number 13 are expensive. So that $20 million slot became Duren. That's genius. And then the Plumlee turned into Olynyk, which turned into Bogdanovich. So it still has legs, you know, and so I'll applaud him for that. Let me go take down my sign. A little bit harsh.
Let's talk about somebody who is an NBA player and will be, and that's Jalen Duren. It's kind of spooky to think how good this kid could be. Still so young. I think he's like 19, I think. And with guys like this, Siddy, who are so young and so raw, a big man like that, what kind of potential do you see out of him? Where is his ceiling, this kid, Duren?
That's a really tough question, because basically you're asking, can he develop a handle? Can he develop a jump shot? Can he develop spin moves? Right. Can he make plays and find teammates? I mean, those are really totally
instead
different
of just
dimensions.
being a lob guy. Yeah, I understand.
That's basically what Cade Cunningham does, right? So I don't know, man. I mean, if he just keeps doing what he's doing, I mean, he's, you know, really valuable. He dominates the area right in front of the basket. So, you know, every team wants that guy. You got to have one of them, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, and with him and Beef Stew and Bagley, it's a really cool trio, because they all, you know, think of a roster as like golf, your golf bag of clubs. You want different clubs. You don't need 4 or 5 irons, you know?
Good point.
And they're all different. So that is a reason for optimism. I mean, this team's going to win games next year. You know, there's no doubt. As long as Cade comes back and doesn't become injury prone. And then, of course, there's the Wemby, you know. Yeah. I'll tell you what, though, with Wemby, too, you know, if the Pistons do get the number 1 pick, you know, Troy Weaver, despite everything I've said about him, is going to look smart, which is not accurate, you know. And I'm thinking, you know, they're going to have to make a statue for this guy, and we'll call him Detroit's Lucky Charm, you know, to get 2 number 1 picks. And then the number 5 pick with Ivy in that draft, he was shooting fish in a barrel. Didn't matter who he picked, you know. Could have been Mathurin, could have been Shaden Sharp. It was win-win-win. You know, not a lot of skill involved, really. A lot of luck, right? But here we go. We got 14% chance. And just a reminder, the Pistons have a 40% chance at a top 3 pick and a 47% chance at number 5. So they actually have a higher chance at number 5 than top 3. Just to keep that in perspective.
Okay. Do you now one thing, real I don't want to harp on Duren too much, but I will say this: I've saw more than one NBA player really sing this kid's praises, say how hard he was to play against. We're looking forward to when Detroit was on the schedule, because Duren was like a Energizer bunny underneath the rebounding machine, and you mentioned dominating the front of the hoop and everything. There were several players in the NBA who are good players who did not like playing against him. It did not relish it. And whenever I see those kinds of comments, which are usually unsolicited comments,
Hey,
it tells me something.
Greg, you know who that reminds me of? Andre Drummond. Remember when Drummond came in the league? Same
Yeah,
thing.
true.
So you don't really know how these things are going to turn out.
Right.
Drummond was just, he was incredible as a rookie. I remember LeBron James talking about him, and he just seemed like a guy who's just so much bigger and stronger than everybody else. The NBA is very physical. You're allowed to, you need guys that can take hits. You need guys that can take up space and grab the traffic rebounds, and that's what Duran does. What he's going to turn into besides this, I don't really know. I'm not really banking on him turning into an all-star, but he can just keep, look at the Steven Adamses and guys like that, that are just year in and year out guys that teams want to have. And they do the dirty work. They're anchors. So at this point, I would just kind of expect that. And if he can develop a game, awesome, but I'm not betting on it.
Let's broaden the discussion a little bit. We're talking with Siddy Hall here, the Stats Guru on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg Eno, and Big Al Beaton is here as well. The NBA as a whole, we're into the playoff season now, and the usual suspects are in the playoffs for the most part, even though the Warriors didn't have a great year, but they did sneak in. They're down 0-2, and I think I read somewhere it's the first time they've been down 0-2 in any series since Steph Curry joined the team. Now, is that right, or am I making that up?
That is correct, and they're going to have to play Game 3 without Draymond because of suspension. So
right.
They are in a tough hole.
Is there any? I know Milwaukee lost. Didn't Milwaukee lose Game 1 at home?
They lost to Miami, and Giannis is not. It's probably not going to play in Game 2. So well, the NBA is getting more like hockey. It's finally getting a little bit of flattening out. Top to bottom,
Right.
I mean, these number 10 teams and 8 teams, these are good teams.
Sure.
Every team's got talent. And, who's going to get hot? Who's going to stay healthy?
Yeah. All I would add is light the beam. They're having so much fun in Sacramento. I am jealous of the fun they seem to be having out there right now.
I watched a lot of their games this year. I've always got a few pet teams that I watch a lot of, and they were one of them. I'm a little surprised they're up 2-0. I was expecting Golden State to take one of those first 2 games, but their crowds are like college crowds. They haven't.
Well, they're ravenous. They've been in the weeds for almost 2 decades out there.
Right. Only game in town, and then they're playing the defending champs who are just in their own neighborhood almost. Oh my God, the crowd was ready, man. They're loud. They're fun. It's a fun team, and they're the number 1 offense in the league. And when they start draining threes, the crowd just goes nuts.
Yes.
So not an easy place to win.
So are you saying, by the way, I agree with you about the NBA flattening out, and your analogy to the NHL is pretty good. So are you saying this, how many teams then would you say, realistically, I know this is putting you in a box, but how many teams realistically do you think have a shot at winning the whole thing?
I've never really counted. I mean, everyone's been talking about that, and everybody has the same 5, which is Boston, Milwaukee. Everyone's putting Golden State in there before they fell behind. Then Phoenix and Denver. I think that's what everyone is sort of categorizing that way. A month or 2 ago, I thought it was Memphis, and then Brandon Clark got hurt. One of their bench guys. Memphis is a weird team, and they got these no one out. They're just different than everybody, and they can win in a lot of different ways. But Brandon Clark is one of their energizer bunnies, and I said, they can't replicate him. And then Steven Adams never came back. So, and now Morant's hurt. And they got LA in the first round. That was crazy, huh? You end up in the number 2 seed facing the Lakers.
Right.
So it's really cool. The playoffs are awesome this year.
Yeah, so far so good. So let's just kind of let's swing before we let you go. Let's swing it back real quick to the Pistons coaching thing, only because that's what's really the hottest thing going right now. Do you have any? I know you just putting your dislike of the whole Casey being gone thing aside. Is there anyone that's been mentioned that Al alluded to earlier? The names that have been mentioned. Is there anyone out there that would make you feel a little bit better about the situation if the Pistons were to hire him?
Not really.
Okay.
To be honest,
Fair.
and I say that because I'm being honest, man. I don't
Yeah.
even know who some of these guys are.
Yeah.
That's fair.
You know,
That's
I mean,
fair.
who are they? You
Yeah.
know, they mentioned the Milwaukee's top assistant. I'm like, okay, that's a winning organization, and there have been a lot of good coaches have come out of the Budenholzer camp.
Mhm.
So you know how that goes. Everyone starts grabbing, you know, like in football, they start
Right.
grabbing all the New England guys, and
And they never panned out, by the way. Those
yeah, as
the
Lions
guys from
fans know, right? So, but
Mm-hmm.
I would go Kenny Atkinson. I like Kenny Atkinson. You know, he was supposed to take the Charlotte job, and then he reneged, and then he so that was and he's been sitting on the sidelines for Golden State. I don't know if he wants a job, but I liked what he did in Brooklyn. I think everybody, he was one of those coaches that took what appeared to be a bad team and made it overachieve. So I don't know. Is that what Detroit needs? Does that mean he's a guy that can take you to the top? I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'd rather have Casey. You know what you got, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And he did have a year left. He did have a year left on his contract, and you can make the case, all you want, I guess, that makes him a lame duck coach, and I guess that'd be fair. That's true. But on the other hand, that's just the way it is sometimes. I don't know. I think that it doesn't really matter how many years you've got left on a contract as a coach. I think
yeah, it
I
does.
think you're always on the hot seat potentially, no matter how many years you've got left on your contract.
Well, I guess sometimes, like in Portland, I thought Chauncey Billups was going to get fired, after year 2, but he's probably locked in for 5, and they don't want to pay 2 coaches right now. Maybe it might influence your thinking. I'm not sure, but I got to say though, you've heard me complaining about Troy Weaver. I'm having doubts about his ability to make decisions. I'm wondering about his ability to. Gores is good at attracting people.
Yeah.
He brought in Stan Van Gundy, who, looking back, we're like, oh, that didn't work. But at the time, that was a coup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And bringing Casey was a coup. So if Gores is involved in this, he must be a good salesman. And Detroit's got a good situation, with these young guys. Well, I mean, why wouldn't a coach want to try that? So for those reasons, they should be able to attract someone good. Can they make the right decision? Remains to be seen.
Let's go real quick. I'm glad you mentioned Chauncey, because the Pistons fans, of course, who are listening to this podcast are always going to have a great affection for him, for what he did here. But those same fans may not really be tuned into what's going on in Portland, because you're just so out there. You don't really see their games a lot, and you don't really. It's hard to follow, even in this day and age of the internet. What's going on with Chauncey out there? Is he a guy is this the Peter principle, where he is maybe best as an assistant? Is he what's happening in Portland that makes you think that he would have been maybe on the hot seat?
Well, obviously underachieving. They have Damian Lillard. I mean, this guy's one of the all-time greats. This guy's as good as Kobe Bryant. And they can't get anywhere close. Basically, they had Terry Stotts as coach, and Stotts, there's a guy, add him to the list, He was a guy who seemed to squeeze a lot of wins out of a thin roster. It was Lillard, Nurkic, a couple of other guys. They didn't seem to have a lot. And they reached, I don't know if they reached the conference finals once, but they at least got to the semis, and they always won more games than people expected. And then they said, okay, we got to try something different, because that's what we do after every 3 or 4 years. And they brought in Chauncey, the NBA's most casual coach, who kind of stands on the sidelines. It's really peculiar. He kind of stands on the sidelines like he's waiting for the next game, like a player. Just got his hands in his pockets, just real casual, on his feet, and I'm like, he doesn't look too intense, like you expect. Well, whatever works for you, right? But you look at their win-loss record, come on. And another bad note, last year they made some trades, trading CJ McCollum and some other guys. And every guy they traded, their numbers went up when they went to their new team. I mean, what does that tell you?
Right. Well, okay. You know what? This is going to be a fascinating off season for a lot of different reasons, I suppose. And we've got the coaching decision, the Killian Hayes decision. There's the draft, obviously. So lots to chew on. So we should bring you back probably as we get closer to the fall, before maybe sometime during training camp. Once all the dust is settled, once we know who the coach is, once we know who the draft picks are, once we know who the free agents are that they're going to be signing potentially, once we know what they've done on the roster. Well, so once that's all settled, let's bring you back. Okay.
All right, I'm going to give you one sleeper free agent. We always
Okay.
think about the big names. The one
Yeah.
sleeper I would love for Detroit to sign. Can it be tough? I think he's a restricted free agent. It's Dwane Banton of the Toronto Raptors. Try and remember his name. Dwane Banton, 6'9" point guard. I think Toronto, he was a second-round draft pick, and they were kind of hiding him in the G League and the injured list. And I think they were trying to hide him to keep his value down as he enters free agency. I would love to have this guy. A 6'9"
What do you like about him? What do you like about him?
6'9" point guard. How many of those are there?
Other than
Magic
Magic Johnson?
7 rebounds, 7 assists, 1.5 steals, 1.5 blocks. He's a bench guy. He's not going to be your starter. But like I said, you have all those golf clubs. It would be cool to have one of them as a 6'9" point guard.
Okay, there you go.
All right. So if you happen to see that, it's going to be a small headline. If it happens, be happy.
Okay. Sounds good, my friend. Thanks
You
for being
heard it
here.
here first, as they say.
All
We'll
right.
talk to you
Thank
soon,
you,
my
Al. Take it
No
easy.
problem.
Enjoy the
Okay.
Tigers.
All right.
We'll try.
Ha, ha, ha.
We'll try. Okay.
All right. So long.
Take care. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you.